What's going on, everybody? Today is September 28th. You are watching the Daily AI Show. It is Thursday, and we are happy to have you here. Oh, look, we got everybody today. That's kind of cool. We got the whole crew with us today, which is super exciting because we are all here to learn from Carl, as we've been joking before we went live.
Carl That's why he's in the middle. He's surrounded by us.
This is the benefit of having 7 of us, is that not all of us have to be the expert all the time. And today it's Carl's turn. So no, I think we all have something to add to this. And all joking aside, today we want to talk about chatbots, but not just chatbots, because I think typically I understand why most people think of chatbots, and I would imagine a lot of our audience would think, yeah, chatbots like you have on the website. And we certainly talked about them before because they can be, I think they have the potential to be great in terms of customer service and, the customer journey once they hit the website, even through, we were talking about it on a previous episode about, being able to make suggestions and corrections to carts and actually take you through the purchase order and all that kind of stuff. But today we want to talk about chatbots, but internal chatbots. How can businesses build, deploy, use internal chatbots in order to do a lot of things? Like when we could talk about today, like everything from onboarding would be much, much simpler. But just think about all the times, I deal in sales, all the times that salespeople have a question that they would then have to take to maybe their superior, their manager, or whatever, to get clarification on, which could be easily eliminated by having a really, really valuable resource that they could just quickly query, and use questions to. So that's just sort of an overview. But I am not the expert here, so I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in first, or we'll just hand it off to Carl. It's one of the two. Because Carl, by the way, Carl has been building this stuff for clients and stuff, so that's why we consider him our resident expert.
Go Carl.
All right.
And go Carl. Go Carl.
So when we're looking at chatbots, one of the reasons, so let's start at the beginning. Building your own custom chatbot is one of the most powerful ways to use AI, because you can connect it to your data. Sorry. And I think in addition to connecting to your data, it can reduce what is one of the biggest issues with large language models is hallucinations. And by connecting it to your data, it should reduce that, and having an ability to source that information. And so there's so many different use cases, because how in any business, in any organization, there is always, at the very base level, there's always a call for data. So a simple one with your people team or human resources team, people are always asking them, hey, what are my benefits? How much time off do we get? All the various questions that employees would ask a business. Now, a lot of people team spend sometimes a good chunk of their day or their week answering those questions, and they're the exact same questions. So imagine if you had a chatbot that is pulling from that special bank of people data from your business, that's enabling you to answer all those questions. That's a very, very simple example that any company should be looking at to increase the efficiency of that team. Now, if you take that across multiple departments like finance, even marketing, sales, accounting, sorry, I just coming off from a cold. The benefits are endless for each one, and they don't have to be complex chatbots either. They can be just very simple chatbots from a very select piece of data or set of data. You don't have to make it for everything. It can just be for a specific function. So for example, a client of mine, a law firm, wanted to do an internal chatbot specifically on a set of cases related to X topic. All they do is upload all their documents related to X topic, and all their lawyers and paralegals, assistants, people in the office can just access that database without having to comb through every single one and trying to find whatever they're looking for. They have a database on that. So really at the very base level, it's a really simple way to, get information to people much faster. And I'm sure we all here can think of different use cases that go beyond what I was just talking about. Those are just like, that's just a simple thing that I think if you start at the base level, if anyone in our audience is wanting to implement, that's the easiest way to do it.
So, Carl, could you delve into just a differentiator between, because, we have language models that are trained, right? They trained on the corpus of data, right? With billions of parameters kind of thing. Then you're talking about, it's a different term. You're gonna not train it per se on the law firm's data set, but so talk about the differences between those two things, but also the difference between the language model output and inference, and understanding that when you're doing inference, I guess I'm kind of leading the question, it's actually able to not just guess the next word in a sentence, it's able to reference the data. So that's where you said hallucination gets thrown to the wayside, because if I say X equals Y in my data set, it will say that in my output because it's referencing it, and it's going to be a one-to-one. So it's actually, unlike data from the language models, there is no actual zeros and ones out there in the ether that the prompt is going out to the language model and getting to give the response. Whereas if you have a data set like the law firm, it is going out there. So talk about the differences between the two terms.
And let's do an example of this. So first of all, when we're talking about large language models such as ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, they're trained on horizontal, like a big corpus of knowledge, let's say the internet. So if it's trained on everything that the internet provides, it has a base knowledge, but it doesn't have very specific knowledge. So what we're talking about here is what's called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, where in addition to the knowledge that said large language model, let's say ChatGPT has, it's also pulling from the an additional set of knowledge. Usually if you're building these things, and a lot of third-party chatbots are built off what's called LangChain, and the ability to retrieve from a vector store that has turned a set of data into what's called embeddings, and it's just reading the embeddings plus your question plus the corpus of knowledge that the large language model that you're using has, and answering your question based on what your question is. So here, I'll give an example. Let's go. So I'm going to present, share screen. Now this one is an external bot. So I'm going to go Chrome tab, window. Okay. So move this over. There we go. Okay. There. Okay. So this is an external example. So this is a chatbot that one of my chatbots for a client that is, say, for Brookfield, that has the guide to the Everly, the AI guide to Everly. So this is trained on their set of data about this property. So it's trained on the website, it's trained on documents, and it's also trained on specific question and answers that they want you to, to ask related to this particular topic, this particular home set, right? So, it's very focused on that. And what's interesting about this is if you try to ask it something not related. So I think the topic you're talking about, can you tell me how to build a galactic empire? This one's for you. In 5 years.
And Jimmy's not even here to hear it.
Yeah. Well, wasn't that Arian? Who is that? Whose was that?
Okay.
Yeah. So as you can see,
I stole it off someone on YouTube.
So as you can see, this bot will not answer anything not related to this particular set. So it's like, what are the cost of homes? Then because that's more related, then it's answering from the corpus of knowledge that it's pulling from. So besides, if I put Bard, ChatGPT, or Claude, then it'll start answer. It can answer the question that I put about the Galactic Empire, but it will not be able to answer what are the cost of homes. Although with Bard, I think ChatGPT with Bing can probably try to find something here to scrape it, but not the specific information. So, for example, what are the amenities? I think this is I hope it's for this one. So I guess that was a different property. This doesn't have any trained amenities on this, so it's not going to be able to answer. And we've designed it specifically not to answer this question, or it doesn't have the information to answer such question, versus something like a large language model, which potentially could hallucinate and try to answer this type of question.
Carl, can you describe quickly how the company would modify the chatbot in response to identifying a question that wasn't answered, but they want to have an answer for?
Yes.
How simply they can update that data.
So with a tool like what I showed you, the update could be instant. So for example, this client, I provide because we can see all the questions asked against that chatbot every day, but I provide it every couple days, and usually over, Monday, let's say a Friday to a Monday, I'll provide over the weekend. And once, my contact there looks at the questions and says, hey, can you revise this, because I don't like the answer, that revision could be done in seconds. In fact, with something like a custom AI chatbot, you could retrain the bot. Let's say there's an update on the website. Let's say there's an update on some collateral. Let's say there's an update on a question. You can retrain it fairly quickly within seconds. And usually that training happens under a minute, maybe 2, 3, if there's a lot of retraining that has to be done. Unlike, one of those large language models, which you could go down the route of fine tuning, but that takes a while to do, versus something like a retrieval augmented generation, which you can do instantly.
So, Carl, can I throw a couple of quick questions at you?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So, question number one. So, for people who probably maybe in bigger companies where they've had some sort of internal database, I remember the term intranet, which used to be really popular back in the past. You could typically search into that for information, details. Where is this different in terms of that? And then the second question, which probably is attached to it, is how does it feed back the questions, and then so that the user, like you or your client, can actually say, oh, these are the questions that I asked, I know what to update. I assume it does that.
So I'll answer number 2 first. Yes. Number 2, you can, in fact, that tool that I showed you was built on a third-party bot, and even custom-built bots, you can see all the questions that people have asked, which then that makes sense if you want to revise it, right? Because you're like, because as much as you, even as we say, we reduce the amount of hallucinations or the propensity for hallucinations, there's still 1-2% sometimes it hallucinates, or it doesn't provide you the answer specifically how you want it. In this case, you can revise it right on the spot. You're like, oh, I don't like this. I can just change the answer specifically. If someone else asks this exact same question, we can answer it. I want it to be answered this way. So one thing I learned about custom AI chatbots that is different from the chatbots that were before, things like ChatGPT came out, the push button bots, or some would call them dumb bots, are that those kind of bots are all logic based. So whether if you say a certain word, if you type in a certain word, or you press a certain selection, yes, no, maybe, it will go down a logical route that company or that person has built. But what's the flaw with that is that as humans, we are unpredictable. Each one of us could ask the same question in so many different ways based on where we are on situationally, environmentally, just how we've asked that same question before, and no bot previously could be able to accommodate all of that. And you've probably all been frustrated. You're like, I want to ask this specific question, but this bot can't answer that, and you keep trying and it won't work. You just peace out. With something like this, especially an open-ended bot, this is where you can actually ask the specific question and get the answer if it's in the database. So, Aaron, that is the difference between just a quick search and actually getting the answer that you specifically want. Because with a search, it may get you there a little bit, but a search won't be able to understand the specifics of what you're looking for, while a custom AI chatbot gets you a little closer. Now, on that front, though, Google has provided a really interesting AI site search that it's very similar to SGE, where it still searches and you still got a search engine results page, but it pulls the information from the specific data, just little clips of it. And it also allows you to have follow-up questions, so it understands the context of your question. So from a site search, that's really interesting.
So in the vein of the topic of today, I'd like to pivot this conversation, if I could, to the costs that it takes. So these different models that you're putting together, obviously one was outward facing, so obviously we can talk about that, but the inward facing model, which is really meant for the internal staff to get information answers quickly on their queries and things that the workflows that would, like HR, like you said earlier, but I don't think it's just HR. That's just kind of a one subset. So the deployment cost, the maintenance cost, the support cost, the API cost, what are we talking about? And how do you sell this to a company as this is an ROI thing, or this is not necessarily a P&L thing, but it does help efficiencies and whatnot. Anyway, how would you sell it?
So usually the how companies that I've sold this or enabled this service to, it's the exact same example that I provided you when I showed them, hey, how often does your company get X questions about this? Oh, we do this a lot. It's like every week. It's usually like, oh, it's all the time. So it's like, here's an example. So I would show them either that example or another internal example, and I show them this is what we can do. And most of the questions have been like, oh, how long does that take to build? Oh, we can build this in 30 minutes for you, depending on how big your data is. And that usually gets the ball rolling. Now, in terms of a cost, so there's costs for the company and costs for you, or how you would charge. So cost for the company would be, obviously how I charge it would be an implementation fee and a implementation fee, the strategy behind it, all the resources you require to test it, because there is no way any of this should be going out without rigorous testing. You do not create this and have only your provider test it. You have got to get a group of people. I highly recommend keep testing it. Pardon the French, test the shit out of it. So because there you can get all the potential flaws, and then you can make the adjustments. And it's like, oh, and sometimes when you're scraping, the website information is incorrect. You're like, oh, right, we forgot to update this. All those things come into play. And usually this thing isn't deployed for at least 2 or 3 weeks before when this gets built, just because I highly recommend people test it. Now, the cost of this, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, do you usually get, I do want to hear this part too, but like, do you usually get like a small cohort? Is that how you usually handle it?
Yes.
And do you like try to diversify that cohort to make sure that you're getting enough variety of questions to try to, I mean, essentially, right, we're trying to break it. That's really the whole testing thing is like, test it and see if you can break it. Cause then we're going to stress test it essentially. But anyway,
you need, and no matter how much testing you do, you're putting it out into the wild, where, again, as I mentioned, humans are unpredictable. So no one knows what type of questions, how they're going to ask that question, and what combinations of questions you can possibly get. So And that's the stress test, and that's why you need to, from as a vendor side, you need to work with your clients. Like, it has to be a partnership. Every couple of days you have to keep reviewing. This cannot be a set it and forget it, because this is something that, like, as a new technology, even though we put all the guardrails in place, it's still artificial intelligence. I have no clue if you just set it and leave it, and nor will we do that. We'll, like, part of the service is to review the questions and so on. So going further though, in terms of the company charge would be how much the vendor is charging plus the API costs. Now, some vendors would take it on, so it's just part of the fee. But usually for me, I'd like the company to have their own, whether it's OpenAI or Claude, whatever it is, they are paying for the tokens that they're using. It just makes it clean. And I can't give you a specific number because it all depends on the interactions you have with this bot, right? If there's that example I have on for example, like a people team one, how many questions you get? It won't be that many, but if you say, we created it for an internal event, that, an international event that people are going to, that's going to start ringing you a lot more, because people are going to start asking the same. You see the same questions over and over, but just asked in different ways as it gets closer to an event. So there's that cost. Plus, you also have to remember there's a maintenance cost too. That's the most important thing, because once you deploy it, you have to maintain it from, what questions asked, and maintaining the database that it's pulling from, depending on your situation.
So if someone wanted to create something like this, and they had a small budget and they didn't want to do any coding, what's like an entry level, really cheap and simple one that they can do themselves? Is there options out there for that?
Yeah, there's a lot of providers for this, because this is a use cases for this. Like, the most simple basic one that you can probably do is actually a one that's run by Zapier. Is it Zapier? Zapier.
Zapier makes me happy.
I just got it. Okay. And the set of, and you'll have, just look up Zapier AI chatbot, you'll find it. And that one, the amount of data you'll be able to put in is, I think it's limited to 1 megabyte. Is it 1 megabyte still? I can't remember. But that gives you a very simple starting point. That is probably the most basic you can do. Now, there's other companies like Dante, Retune, Chatbase, VoicePress, I think, or BotPress, VoiceFlow. There's all these different ones charging different prices. I would try their freemiums and test it with some of the data.
I'll also say there's lots of, if you're using a WordPress website, there's lots of WordPress plugins that are super plug and play. You just attach the API, you attach the vector store that you want to use, and bada boom, bada bang, it's on your website. So those are kind of cool. They're easy to deploy. So
yeah.
Carl, I pulled this up really quick because I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Dante just released this new feature. I don't know if everybody else has it, but as we would suspect, it's going more multimodal. And now Dante can pull back in from chatbot queries like this one you're about to see. They can pull in, like, hey, it says, like, what's the coaster break look like? And it's pulling in images to answer those questions. The impression I get from that is, hold on, let me stop screen share. The impression I get from that is one or two things. Either one, it's a little bit of magic, and it's really, really good metadata that attached to those images, and that's what it's actually querying. Or two, it's what I hope it is, which is that we know that, OpenAI has talked about this. Other language models have talked about what we assume is coming, which is, Google can read a photo. OpenAI can read and interpret a photo. It's not really doing it off of like old school metadata. It's doing it through new AI function and functionality. So I don't know if you know whether Dante is or the other. I guess I can read on this more, but I'm just curious your thoughts on this, because I think this really opens up a whole new level of how teams could be internally using chatbots.
So I'll give you an example of this. So there's a company that does metal construction, and part of their employee, I guess, handbook, which is like this thick, has all the images of components and parts they need to do with their metal construction consulting business. So all their employees continuously have to, look up those parts. Now, how we've implemented is the tech side. I know that Dante has it, and we're kind of testing it, and it's not infallible, and it's, for me, it's not up to the point yet where it's like, okay, we're going to put it out to the public. There's still a lot of work related to it, but as you can tell, within 2-3 months, it's going to get really, really good, and I won't have to worry about it. So examples like those are coming, and it's, it gets you excited, and it opens up a whole new door. Now, I also want to say that when you're building these things, don't think of it just as data retrieval, because obviously that's its primary purpose. But when you're building chatbots, there's two things that I've been testing out. One is, I would say, the poor person's version of fine-tuning. So however long it takes to fine-tune, what I've been doing is feeding it information. And in these tools, you have what's called a base prompt, where you essentially give it instructions on what it is. Most of the time you'd say, pull this information from this set, don't answer any other questions. But instead, what you can do is, you are now, let's say, a content generator on this topic. Use the information provided as the basis of, all the outputs you provide. So that opens up a whole new avenue your chatbot can do, trained on all the data that you're providing it. So that's one way. And then you can also use it for research, right? You're a research bot, and then you feed it all this information that you want it to research, and then it comes back to you. So there's different ways that you can use this, and I'm exploring that a little bit more than just data retrieval.
So
Okay.
I think
I think it's that TLDR time.
I'll kick this off with the TLDR, because this is what I heard, Carl, and like, maybe this isn't a TLDR, but this is what I get. Number one, it's not a set it and forget it. You said that right away. Number two, internal chatbots can be an amazing resource. They don't necessarily have to be complex. There's easier solutions from stuff like Zapier, but then you can get into stuff like Dante and above and beyond, and then even more custom built there. Number three, I heard you say you may not actually only end up having one internal chatbot. It may make sense that you have an internal chatbot that's just HR focused, because it does a damn good job at HR focused stuff. But then there may be another one that is broad, that handles the entire company for like days off or maybe things like that. Then there may be 2 or 3 other small subset chatbots that only one department is going to use. Finance is going to use, because it's really, really trained up well. But if a HR tried to use that same chatbot, it may not give us the same type of answers. So then maybe the last thing I would say that I really heard that I thought was really valuable is, in terms of cost, obviously, we don't expect you to say, hey, Carl, what's your cost or your prices for this? But what I do think companies really need to understand is, like, it's not necessarily expensive to start, but or get set up day one. There's the initial part and the process and the research to do that. It's really thinking about, hey, how many questions are going to be asked against this bot, because there are API calls on that. And although they're minimal, they can rack up over time. Like your example of like an upcoming event, that could easily skyrocket to, in a big company, 200, 300, 400 requests a day going into that all may be really, really similar, which makes me also think, I think companies should just also see this as a really valuable tool to highlight the stuff that is coming up, and not just say, oh, let's continue to let the chatbot do that, but maybe we need to restructure the way our other internal documents are created, because this is clearly something that comes up way more than we thought. And if we just refocus or retrain the way we do our onboarding or whatever, it's going to, because we'll have handled it, it will drop the amount of requests coming in. So I really see it as this full service where a company can do like continuous process improvement through the whole cycle. The chatbot is helping them understand their internal employees better, which in turn is helping them create better resources from the get-go for those employees. So this has been really awesome. But those are kind of the things I got. Did I miss any of those as far as like a bit of a summary?
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a TLDR.
Well, I know more people got stuff out of it, but that's what I heard. You know,
I'm gonna do a TLDR here for organizations that have wanted to standardize their operating procedures. So that's an SOP. They develop playbooks. These are documents, whether in Google Drive or elsewhere, that capture all of the internal processes of the company and are available as resources, but nobody ever goes and looks at the playbooks. Putting an individual chatbot for each department in the hands of the department to create the accessible playbook is a big and early opportunity for you to introduce AI in your company.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I will say too, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have clean data or good data, it's useless. You're not going to be able to do anything with these bots. It's not going to be fairy dust that fixes your data. So you got to have that first. Secondly, don't just do it for a chatbot's sake. What problem are you trying to solve? What solution? Because all this could be database queries could do just as good or better, like to Brian's point, and cheaper than maybe what you do is a hybrid database query with the language model that kind of fills the gaps of where it's, whatever. But anyway, those are my 2 thoughts.
Right. The part of what we talk about is having AI councils or having people in your organization who are on the front lines and testing things within their job function. And then the question is, how do you disseminate that? And this is one of the ways that you could disseminate. Like the phrase that I'm hearing in my head is the 100th monkey thing. Like and obviously we're not monkeys, and this won't take 100 of you. But the wisdom that is acquired by a subset of people can then be added to this and accessible to a larger group of people in fairly short order, right? It really just creates the opportunity to grow quickly in the knowledge.
So for me, it's I certainly see a lot of benefit from this as an outward-facing tool, particularly on the marketing side. One of the things that marketers love is feedback and questions from customers and potential customers. And if you've got something externally facing, you can get a lot of really good info, and that can help your marketing. But internally, I think everyone probably should stick their toe in the water if they haven't done it, and just try and maybe get a chat-based account set up or something really cheap, just to have a bit of a play with it and see how this works. Just for internal stuff, I think there's some interesting possibilities there, because this technology is only going to get better, like all of the AI stuff, and it's going to be easier to use as time goes by.
Yeah, definitely. I think once you devise your AI strategy, you've already decided you want to get it in there and going. This is a great gateway to implementing AI across the board.
And last
Thanks,
but not least,
Carl.
reach out to Carl. Carl is doing this for clients.
Cool,
So,
Carl.
Definitely.
I would say, connect with Carl. He's always putting out amazing stuff on LinkedIn as well as other places. So, for that matter, reach out to all of us on LinkedIn and follow what we're doing. But certainly for this type of stuff, obviously, Carl is our resident expert. This was awesome, Carl, and everybody else. I learned a lot myself. Opened up my eyes to even more ideas of ways companies can use it. So this was awesome. Really appreciate this. And tomorrow we'll be back for Aloha Friday, and it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, but I know everybody else too. We're excited about it, and that's just talking about AI consultation. Figuring out kind of like what Carl was saying, but ways that you can get in front of businesses if you are thinking about offering AI services. How do you go about doing that? We've done some internal, what we call jam sessions as part of the AI exchange. And they were probably one of the more highly attended sessions. So we know it's something a lot of people are thinking about. If you're interested in learning about how you could perhaps, market your AI, tools, strategies, services, or otherwise, I highly recommend you guys coming back tomorrow. Okay, that's it for now. We will say goodbye. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Arrivederci.